Happy Thursday and welcome to another edition of Husker Online Headlines. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, as we'll be with you here going through kind of the big headlines across Husker Nation. And we've got a lot to get to, a great show on tap here as we get ahead of the snowstorm, by the way. Steve Sipple is just getting ready for another round of shoveling.
Yeah, I mean, I'll believe it when I see it. I'm kind of that guy.
Yeah, I'm scheduled to speak in Springfield tonight at the Legion Hall, and they're still doing the event. And I'm like, gosh, I hope I get out of there, but I will.
Springfield Legion Hall. Last time I went there was some detours, so be ready for that. It might be. I mean, I don't know, Sean. The snow thing, the cold's going to be the factor that. Let's not talk about weather.
All right, let's get into the show.
This isn't Super Saver. I'm not in line at Super Saver.
People don't come to Husker Online Headlines to hear Steve Sipple and Sean Callahan speculate on the weather.
You ever stand in line at a grocery store? That's where you talk about the weather with somebody. Not here.
Headline number one, Nebraska goes into the portal again. They add Wake Forest wide receiver Jamal Banks. He's the second portal add at receiver the Big Red have brought in this year. He joins Isaiah Nayor from Texas. Both Nayor and Banks 6'3 plus 6'4 Banks. Banks said on his visit he weighed 218 to 220 pounds.
Oh, he did.
He said he's been eating well, though, because he's been on a lot of trips. And this was a battle. And I think sometimes there's people out there that say, oh, who else wanted the guy? And you look at, I was kind of floored how many visits Banks took. He visited Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Minnesota, Michigan, and Purdue, picked Nebraska after a visit to Lincoln this past week. Now, some of those visits by Banks, I believe, took place in December as well.
Okay. So he has an affinity for the upper Midwest. Chooses Nebraska over some really good programs. I mean, really, really good programs. And it's a gigantic get. The best way I can put it is after Nebraska landed Isaiah Nayor, I looked at the you look at the receiver group, like, yeah, it got an upgrade. And now with the addition of Jamal Banks, I look at the receiver group with a lot of intrigue, because now you add these two veterans to a good group of young receivers: Malachi Coleman, Jalen Lloyd, Jaden Doss.
Demetrius Bell coming up the ranks. Sometimes we don't mention Alex Bullock enough, but he had 15 catches last year. So now that group, I mean, it looks pretty good. Well, and Garcia Castaneda, like, he's a kind of a mystery.
Yeah, we don't know about him yet.
Off the injury.
Yeah, we don't know about him yet.
Second year in a row, he's not finished out a year for Nebraska.
Sean, there's been crickets. On him. So I don't know what to make of that part. And I don't know if it's, I mean, I do respect Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, but I don't know if it's integral right now to have him back. So
they need these guys.
Oh, they needed them. They did. If they, and let's be real, without Dylan Raiola, I don't know. I mean, you might have him here and you might not.
And you look at, this is really the fourth year in a row that arguably the number one receiver from Nebraska is going to come out of the portal.
We'll see on that, but yeah, it definitely could happen.
Like, I mean, on paper, the production of these two receivers says that one of these two gentlemen, Nayor or Banks, will be the number one leading receiver on this team, receptions and yards.
Yep.
A year ago, Billy Kemp led Nebraska out of Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
The previous year, Trey Palmer had a record year at Nebraska, and then Samori Toure was drafted as a receiver from Montana. So
was
four consecutive seasons.
Isn't that something? Yeah, Trey Palmer and Toure were pretty big play guys, big yards per catch totals. Now Kemp wasn't. Kemp averaged 8.9 yards per catch. It'll be interesting on this. We talked about this year, and we kind of butted heads over it. When you said Kemp's a number one receiver, and I said, yeah, he is, but it's because they don't really have a number one receiver. Would Nayor or Banks fit that better? I think one of those guys could.
I think going into the year, I give Banks the edge because he played the last 2 years.
Yep.
Naor
really productive.
Hey, Naor has played one game in 2 years.
Right.
I mean, we're solely going off of the Wyoming year, and if that receiver shows up. Now they got 2 though. I mean, Dylan Raiola has to just feel 100% better about the receiver situation now, just to add 2 grown men veterans. I mean, two, one's a 5th year, one's a 6th year.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're talking about, Jamal Banks last year, I mean, this is just last year, 59 catches for 653 yards, 4 TDs. Similar numbers in 2022, but with 9 TDs. Naor at Wyoming 3 years ago had 44 catches for 800 plus yards and 12 touchdowns in a season. That's the number that really gets me. So yeah, one of those guys will be number 1, I would think. Now Naor, I agree with you. He hasn't really done much since Wyoming, except he did have a really good spring at Texas. And it was the spring of 2022. And he definitely
could have been the number 1 there.
He definitely raised eyebrows. I mean, all you got to do is go back and read quotes from Steve Sarkisian. I have my nephew is a Texas grad, and he said there was excitement about Naor.
Naor was brought in to be almost a number 1 for Texas.
I mean, I don't know that. That's you. I don't know.
His ranking in the portal and production at Wyoming led me to believe that Texas was bringing him in.
Okay.
I mean, he had USC and Ole Miss in Florida and Tennessee. Those teams, they saw that. I mean, everybody wanted him at that point. He was a huge commodity coming out of Wyoming.
He was. Big numbers at Wyoming.
And then the injury set him back, but Miami still was involved. Some other teams were involved. And I really think the opportunity to play with Dylan Raiola and just learning more about him, meeting him, was a huge selling point for both these receivers. Because who makes receivers look better? Quarterbacks.
Exactly. Or who makes quarterbacks look better?
Receivers.
Right.
They need, but if Naor and Banks were running wild and wide open last year, would you have trusted Nebraska at the quarterback play to get them the ball consistently?
Not necessarily.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
They see the quarterback. Now, if Dylan Raiola is not here, I'm not sure they get either of these guys.
You might be right. Now, you did talk to Banks at length, and he did mention a lot of other factors. I mean, he loves the whole package. I was really struck by something he said to you, too. He told you, and this is something that I think as sports writers, we overlook sometimes, how important it is to these players that a coach can show them discernible evidence of how they can develop them. He wants to play in the NFL. Garrett McGuire had to show Jamal Banks, this is how
the blueprint.
This is the blueprint. I can make you a better player and get you to the league. But they have to be able to show it. Now, if he comes in here and Garrett McGuire fumbles through that conversation, he might not be here. Banks might not be here. And if you don't get Banks, Garrett McGuire might not be here. If you don't get players like that, you got to get guys like that.
It's amazing, though, just in a year or two, how much more settled things seem where they're getting these guys. Where in year 1, it just wasn't as easy to get these types of players to Nebraska. I mean, they got Billy Kemp. That was a big perceivable get. At the time, Jeff Sims was a perceivable, but they to get 2 receivers like this in 1 year, that's really impressive.
Yeah, I think when all this started, when you kind of dug out the list of guys that were going to visit here out of the portal, I think the immediate assumption was they're going to get one of the 2 receivers.
Getting 2 was like pie in the sky almost.
Yeah. Now fast forward, here we are. They got both of them. And I got excited a few days ago, last week actually, when I started watching film of them. If you're a Nebraska fan and you're cynical, skeptical of all this, and you're the guy or the woman who asked the question, well, they're only here because they couldn't make it at their other place.
Or NIL.
Yeah, if you're that person, go watch their film. Just go watch it and tell me what you think. It's real. Those plays that Naor made at Wyoming, they're real. You watch films of Banks, and he's catching balls against ACC teams, catching balls against Florida State. And I mean, the numbers are the numbers. They put numbers up at, I mean, Banks put numbers up at a Power 5 school.
And they just haven't had big bodied physical
Right.
receivers. And look, Malachi Coleman's big body. I don't look at him yet as a physical receiver. He's going to get there, but he's still developing.
He's still developing, but I'll tell you what, I like that picture. If there's 4 wide out sets and 3 of them are Nayor, Banks, and Malachi, that looks pretty good.
Well, and the speed of Malachi, the speed of Jalen Lloyd.
I like the way that looks.
And I'm telling you, Demetrius Bell, do not sleep on him this spring. I think he's going to make a name for himself. And Alex Bullock's going to be in the rotation. You know that. He might still start. I mean, it's really hard to say who that starting 3 would be today.
And you know, they rotate them. I'm still on that kind of Jaden Doss train, to be honest. I don't think we saw Jaden Doss.
He redshirted last year too. He played 4 games, and they kept the shirt on him.
Came off that August injury. I like what I saw, but he came off an August injury. I think Doss will be a significant factor next year. But anyway, I think what we're getting at here is the wide receiver room needed an upgrade, and it got a major upgrade.
All right, before we take things to headline number 2, HuskerOnline headlines brought to you by our proud sponsor, Omaha Steaks. They've got a great promo and deal going on right now. You get 50% off site-wide on a lot of their, almost all of their, big orders and boxes and items. And then after you spend, there's an order minimum that you have to hit. But once you do that, we're going to take another $30 off that order by simply using promo code Husker. So 50% off already. And then they're going to get you $30 more off with promo code Husker at omahasteaks.com. And, perfect time. Who wants to leave their house right now and go to the store? I went to the store, by the way, Steve Sipple, and
was it packed?
I mean, it's a machete fight.
Is it?
Oh God. I mean, get
people stocking up.
And Costco, forget about it. I mean,
is that right?
I love Costco. I live right next to it, but you just don't want to mess with all the deal. Get the steaks delivered right to your door.
Yeah.
Omaha
idea.
Steaks, 50% off. We're going to give you $30 more off. Use that promo code Husker at checkout. And it's not just steaks. They got seafood and chicken and pork and side items, wine, gift baskets, you name it. There are a lot of great products at Omaha Steaks. We love them. Locally owned, managed by a Husker. Nate Rempe, good friend of mine, is the president CEO. See him at Husker. I saw him this last week. Told him we're getting some great response, Nate, on the ads. So thanks again to omahasteaks.com for sponsoring us here on the HuskerOnline Headline Show. Okay, headline number 2. Nebraska adds a potential starter on the offensive line, and Micah Mazuka from Florida, 11-game starter a year ago, started 10 games the previous year at Baylor. So they're bringing in a 21-game starter. Now, he visited Nebraska a year ago. I say surprisingly. He surprisingly picked Florida over Nebraska. And I remember that night because there was a Husker basketball game going on, and we were kind of waiting around for his announcement, and we all assumed he was going to Nebraska.
Yeah, we had stories written.
It was a perceived blow that they lost Mazuka. He's leaving Florida after 1 year. He didn't, to our knowledge, take an official visit this go around.
He didn't.
And
he didn't take one to Nebraska.
Did not.
Yeah. No,
but
he didn't. I know he did.
He was a real recruit to Baylor. He's from Philadelphia, which we know the Philadelphia ties on the staff run deep. So there was a lot there, and now he'll play his final year. And, it's undetermined how he's coming in. And, this is kind of splitting hairs now with college football, with the scholarships and walk-ons and NIL and transfer portal things. The bottom line is they're bringing in a guy that has a pretty good chance to win a job on the line.
Real good chance. He's a 21-game starter already. Now, you lose Nordy Noeli at one guard and Piper at the other. Henry.
We assume Piper's gone, as far as his health.
I shouldn't say you lose him because he could come back. Lutovsky is in this conversation.
And then maybe a Sam Sledge. But, yeah, I think Mazuka, it sets up for him. It really does.
It really does. And
they laid it out to him, I'm sure.
And you probably, if you look at the depth chart as a Nebraska fan, you probably feel before Mazuka, before Mizuka's commitment, you feel a little bit better about tackle probably than guard, and now you feel much better about guard.
I'd love to know, and I got Mike on the phone yesterday. He declined interviews, so it was hard to get a lot of details from him. He's a grown man. He's a 5th year in college, and a guy like that, you want to talk to him directly and kind of get some thoughts, but not one for interviews is what I gathered.
Well, that's okay. I mean,
tough Philly kid.
Well, yeah, and that fits kind of with his offensive line coach. I mean, Donovan Raiola is really not one for interviews. Donovan Raiola has a pretty hard edge. Kids play hard for him. And I actually kind of like that. I mean, offensive linemen are kind of that way, Sean. They'll talk. They're the smartest guys on the team usually, or if you're typecasting a group, the offensive line I've always felt was the smartest guys, but they're not always big talkers.
I'd be curious though, why he left Florida after 1 year.
Why do you do that? Don't do that.
I know.
I'm because Sean,
yeah,
you just don't know why kids.
Yeah, you don't know. It's just an interesting deal because he could have come here and won a job last year at Nebraska too. And the transfer portal is just a mystery how it's kind of.
I don't try to figure it out anymore.
But
I mean,
now
some of these players that transfer, it's pretty evident why they would, and some of them you just have no idea.
So now you're looking at an O-line. Let's assume
do it.
Prohaska stays at left tackle.
Do it. Yeah.
Ben Hart right tackle. Right. Ben Scott center.
It's pretty good right there.
Then you got a guard now, Mizuka.
Yeah.
And then you probably have a battle for the other guard spot between Justin Evans Jenkins.
Yes. Thank you.
Turner Corcoran.
Yeah.
Or Sam Sledge or Henry Latoski.
You got a pretty good battle there in the interior.
I named off 8 guys that can play.
I'm telling you, Sean, this is getting so God, I hate to do this because people get mad when we get overly excited, but man, they have upgraded. It looks like right now, I don't mind saying Nebraska looks like a pretty good team. They look pretty good to me. This doesn't look like a team that you're like, oh boy, I don't know if they're ready. I don't know if they're ready for this new Big Ten. Oh, I think they're pretty ready.
Okay, think about their weaknesses a year ago. Quarterback. They got a 5-star, number 1 guy in the country.
We'll see how that looks. He's just a young man.
But he's got the talent. Okay.
He does. Yeah.
Running back, they were thin on bodies, and they lost Kewan Lacey. What do? They basically get a better version of Kewan Lacey from a year ago.
Yeah.
And he's got 3 years of eligibility. Dante Dal.
And you got your health back. You think.
And you get those guys back. Receiver. It was, they were playing kids out there. What do? They had 2 grown men. A 5th and a 6th-year guy that are both 6'3", both over 200 pounds.
And one, Banks, was making big catches a year ago in a Power 5 conference.
And then on the O-line, they get almost another version of a Ben Scott type of player. A guy that's proven,
and he has an edge to him, too.
This is not taking Hunter Anthony or Kevin Williams. No. Guys that had not really ever started where they're at before.
No, it's way different.
This is not Jacob Hood.
No.
This is not the other guy from Utah they took.
Tyler Kanak.
This is a proven 21-game starter. So give Matt Rule a lot of credit. I think they have upgraded some key areas without overdoing it in the portal.
Right. The one benefit too, and things move so quickly, and we're always kind of scrambling. It seems like. Get ready. Spring football's got to be great. Spring football is going to be fun to cover.
By the way, I was scrambling so hard. I hit my head this morning.
Yeah, you hit your head. You look like you took one from Ron Stander, the old Bluffs butcher.
Full disclosure, I was loading our fridge and freezer at the same time because I wanted to get to the store before Lincoln got crazy, which I accomplished that part. But in the midst of loading that, messing with the Jamal Banks interview and getting here for the show, I managed to hit my head on the shelf of a refrigerator.
Yeah.
The side shelf. So,
but we always, it seems like we're always scrambling in January, but think about just if you're a Nebraska fan and you're kind of depressed that football's over, the national championship game was on Monday. There's no games ahead. Think about spring football. In our shoes, spring football can be pretty laborious. As a media member, it will not be laborious this year with these additions and with the big horse at quarterback. It's not going to be laborious. It's going to be really interesting.
And, spring game tickets generally go on sale right around that signing day in February.
Mhm.
I would imagine
Fill it up.
there's going to be a good crowd for the spring
I think
game.
it'll be full. I mean, I think Dylan Raiola is a big part of that. But then adding these key pieces, I fill the stadium.
Okay, let's move things on. Headline number 3. Massive news in the coaching world as 3 icons moved on Wednesday, starting with Alabama's Nick Saban, who will retire. 17 seasons in Tuscaloosa, won 6 national championships, had 2 runner-up finishes,
7 national championships overall.
The counting is LSU
LSU,
won. Then played in 8 of the 10 college football playoffs. 8 of the 10.
Yeah.
Had 4 Heisman Trophy winners during his time in Alabama.
49 first rounders. 49 first rounders.
Unbelievable run when you look at what Nick Saban accomplished. And, Osborne was special and did so much in his 25 years. And you said to yourself, who could top that? Well, Nick Saban did. I mean, it's
topped everybody.
He's the modern day Bear Bryant.
Bear Bryant won 6 national titles at Alabama. So Saban matched him.
He won 7 total.
Yeah. Saban, one of the stats that jumps out to me is that Saban guided Alabama to 9 wins in the SEC championship game. He won the SEC championship game more than half the time he was at Alabama. That's breathtaking. The other thing that's breathtaking to me about Saban is the impact he had on Tuscaloosa and in particular the University of Alabama. Since 2007, Alabama's increased enrollment by 10,000 students. Now think about the University of Nebraska increasing enrollment by 10,000 students.
And let's just say that's worth $30,000 a head.
Yeah. The economic impact is ridiculous.
Well, think what that does to like the Target in town.
Yeah.
The Walgreens.
Yeah.
The Hy-Vee.
Yeah. The
Best
rail
Buy.
yard,
The Subway. I mean, yeah.
Everything. 10,000 more students. It wasn't just that. He had a huge economic impact on that area, but 10,000 that's a tangible number that really gets your attention.
Like when Nebraska was rolling in the 90s, like there were guys in my fraternity that I knew that, like a kid that I was friends with from Houston, Texas, he went here because he liked the football.
Yep.
And
that happens.
His family had money and he could have gone anywhere he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to come here because he wanted to go to school with great football.
Yeah. And a lot of students
for the experience.
Yep. Exactly. It raises the profile of a university. It raises the profile not of just the athletic program, of the entire university. And that's what Saban did. But yeah, that he's an icon. He's you just say now he's the best to ever do it at the college level. And we'll talk in the next segment about possible replacements.
Have you ever met Saban?
No, I've never met him.
I've only had that one encounter with him.
And that was?
So the 2008 Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. Saban had just finished his first year at Alabama.
Yeah, first year. That's right.
His offensive coordinator, I think, either got fired or moved on after 1 year. And so he was in the midst of interviewing Sean Watson, who was initially he was retained by Bo Pelini at that point.
Right.
And I sat next to the Colorado offensive line coach who was with the Cleveland Browns now at that point. And just Sean Callahan luck.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy was one of Sean Watson's best friends.
And what did he say?
He said, I'll tell you, Sean, he goes, Nebraska better pay him to Sean Watson, because he's got the Alabama job offer. And I remember we reported that, and we weren't working together, obviously, way back then. And Pelini almost was fired up that report was out.
Fired up would be an understatement.
Yeah. And he said, you tell your boy Callahan, he better have the right story.
Right.
Because if he doesn't, he's done. Well, Bo Pelini challenged me. He acted like I didn't have the story. So I went up to Nick Saban at the Senior Bowl, which is not easy to do.
No.
And he shooed me away.
Did he?
Early. And then I came back at him again. I made another run at him, and he confirmed to me that he interviewed Sean Watson And Sean Watson decided to stay at Nebraska. And he thought
He shooed you away initially?
Yeah. Oh, I made another run. I mean, you were on my ass. And you go, you better be right, Sean. You better be right, because you're going to be in trouble. And I'm like, well, okay. So, and then a couple of weeks later, I run into John Papuchis.
Yeah.
He worked for Saban at LSU.
Mm-hmm.
He was there a little bit. He goes, how did you do that? He goes, you don't just generally get to go up to Nick Saban and interview him like that. And I go, I just did.
Well, you took a good victory lap there. Is there anything else you want to get out?
But that's my only encounter with Saban.
Yeah.
And
I've never had an encounter
now
with
that
him.
was like 07 Nick Saban, who was like 6-6 or 6-7. They went to the Independence Bowl that year. They lost to Colorado, if I'm not mistaken.
It was 2007, I think. Actually,
they played Colorado. Dan Hawkins.
Right, I remember the game.
I
do. In
Shreveport, in the Mecca of cities for Steve Sipple, Shreveport, Louisiana.
Yeah. Think how far. Now think about that. What transpired at Alabama?
What he built from there.
Oh God. Yeah, he just
ended up hiring Jim McElwain as the OC after Sean Watson chose to stay.
That's who it was. Okay.
Colorado State.
Yeah. McElwain could call plays. Anyway, that's really interesting. So now also Bill Belichick,
who's also a close friend with Nick Saban, and Pete Carroll. Here's another fun fact: Nick Saban, Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, all Croatians.
Whoa!
All Croatian heritage.
Really?
I proudly say that because I grew up in the Croatian neighborhood in Omaha, South Omaha.
No, wait a second. Really, all three are Croatians. I'll be damned. I thought you were going to say all three are defensive-minded guys.
Croatian,
it's way more interesting.
Yeah, isn't that interesting though? Yeah, I mean, it just speaks to. I don't know what it speaks to. I mean,
that's just kind of it's a fun fact.
Just the culture.
Yeah, I don't know what it speaks to, but they all are defensive. They all came up on the defensive side of the ball too, which I think is informative. And they're all ridiculously accomplished. So it is I mean, Sean, I don't know about you, but it'll take me a few days to put it all in perspective. Like it hasn't even hit me yet. Really, just the Saban news. I haven't fully grasped it at this point.
Well, and Pete Carroll, if he stayed at USC, who knows? He could have been equally as tenured as Saban.
Yeah, or equally successful.
His Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, that run, those teams were as good as any teams in the era.
Yeah, they were. And interestingly, at Seattle, he was basically forced out. That's my read.
He's 72 years old. Right?
He wanted to keep coaching, though. He said he feels great. He wasn't well. They weren't going to bring him back.
He's going to stay within the organization, though, is what I read.
Is that right? Now, Belichick, you wonder if he'll land somewhere else. I don't know that he's done coaching, although he's in that same age range. They're all three are either 71 or 72. So it doesn't like there's speculation already of Belichick coaching somewhere else.
Could he be like a Tom Coughlin type where he's like a behind the scenes guy for an organization, a grand poobah GM?
I don't know. I suppose that's possible, but what I'm telling you is there's people already talking about him coaching elsewhere.
A lot of jobs open.
Yeah. I don't know what you do there. You gotta, I hate to be the age guy, but how much zip does he have left? Now, Saban, I wish I had the story in front of me. I should have. Saban told his players, and you can read this on ESPN.com. He told his guys that a big reason, if not the main reason he's getting out, is because of the way college football has changed. NIL, transfer portal. It's not as much as a team game anymore. He laid that on the line to his guys, which I found to be fascinating.
And I think when you see teams like what Ole Miss is doing, kind of buying a roster, what Missouri's been able to do, what Miami, what A&M, what Texas, I mean, they're buying rosters at a high rate. I mean, to the point where they might, and this is coming from a source in Missouri, Missouri's going to spend between 12 and 15 million for the roster next year. And I would say the reasonable range for the powerful programs is probably 5 to 10 range.
Okay. And so they've exceeded it.
And Missouri, and I'm sure Ole Miss is in this camp, they're going to be well over that. And it's like, what if you're Alabama? It's like does Nick Saban want to get involved in that kind
No,
of
it's
stuff?
see, there's an interesting conversation there. It's a matter of principle with a guy like Saban. And does he want to play that game? Now, this isn't simple talking. All you got to do is go read the ESPN.com story about his retirement. Sources told Chris Lowe that he told his guys he's not comfortable with the way college football is now, and used it as one of the reasons he's getting out. Lane Kiffin is pretty outspoken about it. He's not comfortable, but he does play the game. And that's what I would counsel a coach to do. You don't have to like it. But you have to participate.
And Alabama is a very attractive job, but I think now that we've expanded to 12, there are way more access routes to the playoff where you don't need to be at Alabama to get in the playoff. You can be at Oregon. You can be at Ole Miss.
That's true.
When the SEC in the Big Ten comprise 6 to 7 of the 12 bids every year, I think a lot of these coaches like Dan Lanning at Oregon, I don't need to go there because replacing the legend is not easy.
Let's go into headlines.
Yeah, let's get into headline number 4. And I kind of teased it.
Mm-hmm.
What does Alabama do next? And I find this from a Nebraska angle interesting too on Alabama. So Greg Byrne, the son of former Nebraska athletic director Bill Byrne, is the athletic director at Alabama. Well, Bill Byrne was the AD at Nebraska when Tom Osborne retired,
Mm-hmm.
but Osborne named Solich his successor.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different circumstance there. And I do think if Saban wanted to probably name a successor, I'm sure he could have, but I don't know if there's anybody there.
I can tell you there's not. There's nobody at Alabama right now. Tommy Rees is the offensive coordinator. He's a young guy. He's only been there 1 year.
How would you like to be him, by the way? He left Notre Dame
Mm-hmm.
to go there for that opportunity.
Well, get to your point. There's nobody there. I mean, Tommy Rees is the OC. Kevin Steele, the former Nebraska linebackers coach, was the defensive coordinator. He retired. So there's nobody in-house he would name. So it is a different situation. But Greg Byrne has a really tough job now in identifying the successor to a legend. Now, Greg Byrne, I'm told, doesn't use a search firm.
Bill Byrne was kind of that way too, wasn't he?
I think so. So
Search
Greg
firms
Byrne
weren't really around back then.
So Dan Lanning, we know as of this taping, he's out. Dan Lanning would have made sense. Dan Lanning was a defensive coordinator in 2021 at Georgia for a great defense, the second best defense in the nation. Lanning's out though already, right? Dan Lanning's out.
Honestly, I think that's smart. He's got a good thing going at Oregon.
Loaded.
They're coming in the Big Ten. They have this guy named Phil Knight, who, as Mark Banker joked, is the owner of the Oregon football team.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you leave that?
Well, because Alabama's more prestigious. I'm with you though. If you win a national title at Oregon, it's never been done, and you've won the first one. If you win one at Alabama, it's
still not enough.
It's in the teens, and it's not necessarily enough. So I understand why Dan Lanning didn't take it. Lanning's only 37 years old too. He can move on later. Now, would you go? I would probably go if I were Greg Byrne, and I don't know if Sark would take it. Steve Sark, I'd go to Sarkisian right now.
But you're dealing with the Texas checkbooks.
Yes, you are. Sarkisian is really well liked in Tuscaloosa. I didn't know that until last night when I was looking into this. Sarkisian is popular. He would be a popular hire, in part because he called the offense in 2020 for the national champions, for the Alabama national champions, and the offense was 4th in the country. So, and he called the offense in 2019 too when they went to the Citrus Bowl. But Sark would be the next I'd go to, and he's 49, by the way. Then I'd go to DeBoer if Sark turns it down.
What about James Franklin?
Oh, he's viable. I would not write him off, but he would be down the list, I think. Franklin,
Ryan Day would
just doesn't.
I think Ryan Day would look at it, but I don't know if they'd come to him.
I wrestle with that. It's not a upgrade. Is the job an upgrade?
Probably not. But
you could say that about Texas too. Is a job?
I think upgrade. Maybe if Ryan Day feels
pressure,
unappreciated.
Yes. I should have said unappreciated instead of pressure. Yeah. I just don't know if they'd get to Day. I don't know. Day's interesting to me.
If Luke Fickell was still at Cincinnati rolling, would he have been a candidate for this job right now?
Depends how far down the list you get. I just think the list, it's I think the top 3 would have been Lanning, Sarkisian, and DeBoer. And I vacillate, honestly, on whether I would go to DeBoer next or Sarkisian next.
Could they pay DeBoer $10 million at Washington if that's what it would take to keep him there?
Good question.
Because that's what I'm sure it's going to get to that number.
DeBoer, some people are going to say he's only been an FBS head coach for 4 years. So he's 49, but he's kind of lightly tested. Why I keep saying DeBoer, and you notice we don't say Lane Kiffin. Why I say DeBoer and a guy like Sarkisian, because they're buttoned down coaches. They're not loose on Twitter. Alabama's a buttoned down, kind of tradition rich, honorable program. It's not an outpost. I don't mention Lane. I love Lane Kiffin. You know that I love him. But I don't think Lane fits at a place like Nebraska or a place like Alabama, where he's going to be on Twitter saying crazy stuff. And, all due respect to Lane, he's obviously done a great job at Ole Miss, and he's a pain in Alabama's ass, but I don't think he belongs at Alabama.
It's eerily similar to how Tom Osborne's relationship was with Monty Kiffin. Completely different personalities. Monty Kiffin, a genius defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Lane Kiffin worked for Nick Saban, just like Monty Kiffin worked for Tom Osborne.
Good point.
And they have it's very similar.
It is very similar in that they're disparate personalities. They're different.
Like Osborne and Monty, it just was never going to be a long-term working relationship because Monty wanted to be the head coach.
Mm-hmm. I go back to DeBoer. Why? Because how quickly he flipped Washington, but not only that, what I see, that's a tough team. They were tough. I mean, 97th in total defense. That's a red flag a little bit. Washington was 97th in total defense, but I watched that defense against Michigan. They got gapped a couple times early, but they settled in, were tough. I mean, that was a tough bunch of dudes.
Well, and the infrastructure's in place at Alabama where they'll get players for DeBoer. And I think what we've learned about DeBoer is,
if he has players,
if you told him to go coach York College,
he'd be good.
He'd figure out a way to get him in line.
Oh God, Sioux Falls. He lost 3 games in like 5 years.
I remember the game that really got my attention at Sioux Falls. They were still NAIA.
Okay.
And they played FCS Division I, North Dakota, not North Dakota State, North Dakota.
Yeah.
And they destroyed them.
See, that does get your attention.
When imagine like Doane.
Mm-hmm.
Or like Concordia going up and beating an FCS team.
I totally agree. So in 2 years, he's 25-3 at Washington. And I just know what I saw. I mean, Washington too beat Oregon. That game surprised me because I thought Oregon's ready made Big Ten because they're so physical, and Washington beat them. I mean, so now and I will say this about Alabama. I think they got to move fast. I don't think you don't want to dilly.
Well, the portal's open.
Yeah.
So their players have 30 days.
Oh God.
And can you imagine the tampering and contacting going on?
I can't imagine.
And there's no assistant. Imagine the assistant coaches there.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those guys keep their job? A lot of those guys are probably figuring out where they're going to go.
Greg Burns working right now. It's safe to say. I mean, it's safe to say you can't. Sean, would you want to go past this weekend?
By Sunday, they'll have a coach.
That's what I think too.
And I think by Monday, there'll be a press conference.
And if they don't, it's because they're getting turned down. We've seen it at Nebraska. We saw before they hired Callahan, how many did they cycle through? How many did Peterson get turned down by?
A lot.
A lot. And how long did that search go? 41 days. It was a nightmare.
Remember when they called the press conference to basically calm everybody down?
Yeah.
After Houston Nutt turned it down.
Yeah. The search went 41 days. 41.
Yeah, they missed the entire. That was before the early signing day, but
that can't happen to Greg Burns.
They got lucky because Bill Callahan. I say lucky, but he became available after they had been turned down by several people. Too many to name.
Greg Burns can't let it go like that. I mean, it would be a national disaster.
Now, could like a NFL guy, I'm just going to throw it out there, like Vrabel.
Yeah, Vrabel makes sense.
Like that would be a good hire.
And now I know people they're going to kill us in the comments for saying that, but Vrabel, he's a football guy. I think he would make sense. Now you wonder, can he run a recruiting organization? You know, that's what it kind of comes down to. Can he do that?
When I wonder about, Bob Welton was at Nebraska. He came here with
Bob Welton. There's a name.
He came with Scott Frost. That was one of the only outside hires Scott Frost made when he came. He left Lincoln after about 3 or 4 months to go to run the recruiting operation for Nick Saban.
Okay.
So you wonder, I would assume Bob Welton is safe at Alabama for now because he might be the most important guy there at this point.
Oh my God. Yeah, this is I guarantee it's intense in Tuscaloosa right now. Intense.
Yeah, it's DeBoer would fascinate me because I do think that'd be a great hire, but does he want that?
I don't know. That's the question. Sark's the same way, Sean. I mean, would Sark take the job? Okay, then once you get past Lanning, who turned it down, did he turn it down, do you think? Or
what about like a wild card?
Now hold on. Did Lanning turn it down, or he just remove his name from consideration?
Just told his team he's staying. So I assume I think it's safe to assume he was in consideration.
Yeah.
Would Lincoln Riley not be in consideration?
I wouldn't rule that out. I would not, if I were the AD though, they just lose 5, right? USC. And you watched their defense. It was terrible. No, I mean, if I were the AD, I'd say no go on Lincoln Riley. It's an offensive-minded coach. Defense was terrible. Come on. No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't. It's a 5-loss season, Sean.
Yeah, it's going to be wild how this all plays out.
Might not be wild. He might have. Hey, for all we know, Byrne has his guy right now. He might have it.
Getting the contract ironed up.
I hope he does for his sake. I hope he does.
All right. Let's take it to final headline. Nebraska basketball gets a huge win this week, taking down number 1 Purdue. The Huskers' first win over a number 1 ranked team since 1982. Were you there? Do you remember that game, Steve Silva? I'd say you were there. Do you remember that game?
I was 16. Yes, I do. I remember it was at Missouri.
Pavelka called that game, which is amazing.
Pavelka called it, and it was raucous in the Hearns Center in Columbia. Steve Stepanovich was the center for Missouri, and a damn good one. I mean, it's like one of the best in the country. Yeah, Missouri was number 1. I think now I'm going to get myself in trouble. I think they had John Sunvold and Anthony Peeler. Peeler might have came on later, but anyway, yeah, it was a monumental moment in Nebraska when they beat
see. And I was, that stat stunned me because I thought some of those Kansas wins in the knee era that maybe one of them was a number 1 ranked win.
No, 1982, and I think it's only happened. Nebraska beating the number 1 is 5 times now, just 5 times. So yeah, it doesn't happen.
But what a night for Fred, for the players. I mean, the way they shot the ball, they could have beat about anybody.
You know, I can't push back on that. They beat the number 1 team handily. I mean, they won by 16.
To the point where Purdue didn't even try to foul. I mean, the last 2 minutes, Purdue just pulled back.
There's nothing you can't diminish this win. I mean, they handled Purdue. I watched Purdue. I happened to watch Purdue on Friday night. They played Illinois at home. I'm not diminishing the win, but I'm going to tell you this. My thought was, as I was watching that game, is if Purdue's number 1, it's not a great year in college basketball. I said that. I said that on my show on Monday. They're good, and it's a great win for Nebraska, a real meaningful win for Fred. Now the key, Sean, is going to Iowa on Friday and winning, because you want to show that you're. I mean, Nebraska basketball has been defined by mediocrity for a long time. Defined by mediocrity. And the hallmark of mediocrity is inconsistency. And what would be more inconsistent than beating the number 1 team handily and then losing to Iowa? It would just, you'd kind of be like, okay, same old stuff.
Well, in Wisconsin, by the way, that's a good team they lost to on the road.
Really good. Now, I was telling you and Rob the other day, I watched Wisconsin against Nebraska, and then that was after I watched Purdue. And my thought was, I'm not sure Purdue's better than Wisconsin.
Well, right now, Wisconsin already has a 2-game lead over Purdue.
Yeah.
And they play head-to-head. So if Wisconsin wins the head-to-head, that's essentially a 4-game lead, because the tiebreaker would go to them at that point. So Wisconsin, you can argue, is in the driver's seat early.
Wisconsin
undefeated
is really interesting, because when you think about Wisconsin with Greg Gard, and probably even before him, you don't think of them as an offensive team. Now, all of the sudden, they're putting up big numbers on offense. Greg Gard has sort of changed the way he's doing things. So those two look like the best teams in the league. And I'm not sure Purdue's the best team. Wisconsin is playing every bit as good as Purdue.
Well, Fred Hoiberg has developed this magic formula how to guard Edie.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, it's like
job.
Nobody in the country can guard Edie other than Nebraska.
I mean, like
that. they figured out a way. I will tell you another team to watch. I still think Northwestern
really
is a sleeper. I mean,
they beat Purdue.
They've beaten Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
They did lose to Mississippi State earlier in their schedule. They have the one bad loss though to Chicago State.
Ooh, that is a bad.
They're 12-3, but they beat and their other loss came to Illinois. But they're coming off back-to-back wins now over Michigan State and Penn State.
That's good. Those are pretty good. Penn State's 8-8, but
and
those
Saturday at 11 a.m. we'll see Wisconsin play Northwestern. That's a big game. That's a big game.
Yeah, it's big.
But yeah, Iowa, Nebraska, they could catch a break with the crowd
because nobody will be there
because of the snow.
Yeah,
I mean, Iowa City this week already got 15 inches. They got they got what we got, but it was full snow. We had a lot of rain mix, so it melted.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting 10. They're supposed to get around 10 more inches Friday.
I don't have a scouting report on Iowa other than to say they're not, they're a lower division Big Ten team right now.
I mean, do you think, I don't want to speak out of turn, but do you think this feels like the end for Fran McCaffrey there? Like
I don't know that. I will not go there. I don't follow it.
I still think like Darren DeVries, the Drake coach, would be a home run hire for Iowa after.
I'd have to look at what Drake's doing this year.
They're good.
Are they?
I mean, his son is an NBA player.
Yeah, he would be a natural successor for sure. I don't know if this is it for Fran though, and I'm not going to rule out. I don't know what I just want to make it clear. I wish I could say I've scouted out Iowa. I haven't. I just think Nebraska. I think Nebraska has a great chance to go there and win.
They've played well there. I mean, Fred has gotten his teams to play well in Iowa City
pretty well
over the years too. But yeah, you look at this Iowa team; they're 9-6.
Yeah,
they're 7-1 at home.
Okay,
but they lost to Creighton in Omaha by 8, so they played Creighton fairly tough.
Played them tougher in Nebraska.
They lost to Oklahoma in San Diego.
Oklahoma has been ranked. I don't know if they still are.
They beat Seton Hall in San Diego.
Okay.
But they've got a 20-point loss or 19-point loss to Purdue. They got smoked by Iowa State, 90-65. That was an Ames.
Smoked.
Michigan beat them in Iowa City, 90-80. And Michigan's down this year.
They're down.
So Iowa has not, and then Wisconsin beat them by 11. So you go down the list of schedule here. They just got a nice win though. They beat Rutgers in Iowa City by 9.
Now Fred has a team. He has a team. They are very much. There's good chemistry. And what I've been saying consistently is they put shooters around Casey, so they don't have to lean on Casey. Bryce Williams is a marksman. Rink Mass can shoot it. They have other guys that Casey they can beat you from the perimeter, and I thought that's what Fred did a great job of. They played horrible defense against Wisconsin, then came back strong defensively against Purdue. You just want to see more consistency. I mean, inconsistent. You lose to Creighton by 29. Creighton's that's not a great Creighton team this year. It's good, but you just want to see a little more.
The Minnesota one is the one you would love to have back.
Yeah,
because I think if you have that Minnesota win right now, I'd hate to say it like this, but you feel like okay, they're squarely in today at this point
in the tournament.
Yeah, and
a little early.
Not
a little early for that.
On the brackets, like there's no hesitation that they would be on brackets, and I think the Purdue win has gotten them on brackets now.
Yes,
I think their percentages to get in the tournament are around 70%.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. Now, if you follow Purdue with wins at Iowa and Rutgers. I just got to tell you, in my role, I got to get serious. In my role as a columnist for you, I got to get serious.
Is it realistic though to just expect a split on these two road games?
I mean, a split wouldn't be bad.
And then you got to beat Northwestern.
Yeah.
On Danny Nee Day.
Yeah.
Legends weekend.
January 26th. I don't. I think that's January 26th. Yeah. But a split wouldn't be bad. But man, if they beat Purdue and then win back-to-back road games, 5-2.
Bring the energy.
5-2 in the league. But now the winner gets really serious.
They have to bring the energy. And that the Wisconsin game, their defensive pressure just wasn't.
No, it wasn't there. I watched the game. Not only were they not getting steals, they weren't getting deflections. It was terrible. I was gonna write about that game. And it was over. I mean, it was over so fast. It was like, what am I going to write about?
You were so proud of your game plan. You're like, Sean, I'm going to write about hoops.
Yep. I had a game plan. I committed my day to it. And then the first 5, 7, 8 minutes happened. I'm like, well, I'm not writing from this, because I would have had to hammer them. I didn't want to do that. I didn't really want to do that this early. Then they came and beat Purdue. So.
Right. Good call.
Yeah, good call.
All right. Well, lots going on. Robin Washut, by the way, will be in Iowa City. He's trekking out there Thursday to beat the snow. So
determined.
Robin is determined. Hey, he brought me back 2 cases of Spotted Cow beer from Wisconsin.
He did?
Yeah. I paid him.
Did you?
Obviously.
Yeah. So he delivered them to you.
Oh, yeah. He smuggled home 4 cases of Spotted Cow.
I was not I'm not a big beer drinker. And I was always sort of like, I work with Parker Gabriel, great friend. And he would always talk about Spotted Cow, he and Chris Basnet. And I'd be like, how could it be this good? And then I had a drink of it one time. I was like, okay, that's serious.
It's got really kind of like a tanginess to it. I can't explain it.
Smooth, but it's kind of smooth.
Yeah,
too.
it's a good. I popped one open last night. So thank you, Robin.
Did you relax at the end of the?
I was in Milford. I mean, I was in Milford. I had to speak at a event there the night before, so
you had to calm down.
Looking forward to tonight, Springfield Legion Club, but lots going on. Make sure you take advantage of HuskerOnline.com. Promo code NU1 and get you 2 months for $1. 2 months for $1. Promo code NU1. For Steve Sipple, I'm Sean Callahan, signing off for another edition of Husker Online Headlines.